Here we go. Tum. Then, or next, came the Regia Pelicaes. Women often call their rivals Pelicaes, but it's just a concubine for a male. So the royal concubines, tree centre, 360. And there should be another 5 for the days of the year. Quinque. Probably spelled it wrong. Anyway, 365 were via bantor. They were carried or drawn in a carriage or whatever. And ipse themselves, they were in cultu and ornatu regia. So their clothing and all their jewellery, etc., was of a royal nature. Postques, post these pelicaes, these concubines, the pecunia of the king, the money of the king. Sexcenta, 600 mules and 300 camels were vehebanting carrying this money, with a presidio prosequenting following, so there's a protection or a guard following of archers, Sagittarians. Sagittarians are archers, if you know your horoscope. Proquinorum and qui and amicorums. So if relatives of and friends, the cognaxes, so the spouses of his relatives and friends, proximae, they were next in line to this agmine, to this column of the archers and the money. And gregs, which are flocks of lixarums and calonums. Sutlers and camp followers, you always see these in Roman camps, so I guess the Persians have them as well. And they were vehebantored as well, they were carried. Ultimate he ran. So last of all there was quisque, each one with suis duca bosses, each one with their own generals, were the levita armed. So levita, you take there's an adverb, so they were armed lightly or they had light arms, and they come along with their leaders who were co-granting or forcing along the agmen, the column. Contra, see quiz. Contrarily, if someone were to intuitor, to gaze over the Achaean Macedonian, the battle line of the Macedonians, you'd see a dispar facies, a very different look of appearance. 2 horses and the men, not gold, not various coloured vestments, but there was ferro, iron, steel, and are bronze, fulgentibusing, shining. The agmen of the Macedonians, paratum, prepared also to stand and to follow. And it wasn't just a turba, just a mass or a crowd. You also get turbations and confusing from that same root word. This column, neither was it pre-grave. It wasn't burdened down with sarconuses, with sacks, whatever they're filled with, but it was intensum, looking not only non-modo to the signum, any signal given of the leader, but even his nutum, his nodding or guiding them with gestations. Et locus castris, and there was a place for a camp, and the comitus, the provisions, sapetibant, they were supplied provisions for the army, exercitu, 4th declension dative singular. So therefore, to Alexander, in his Achis, in his battle formations, soldiers he was not lacking. There were a soldier was not lacking to Alexander. Soldiers, plural you might want to say. And Darius, contrarily, the wrecks of such a multitude, blah blah blah, he was redactus, he was reduced in the place in which he would fight, in Gastis, so it's very a narrow field or something like that, and ad porcitum, and he was facing a smaller amount of people, which he spurned or he had contempt for in an enemy, in a hoste. Chapter 4, Interior. Meanwhile, Alexander, having prepositoed this guy, which is spelt wrong in both ways, so one version has H there, and the other one has a S there, and a small a, so it's like this translation's got its own language. He was in charge, he'd put this guy in charge of Cappadocia. So anyway, Alexander, meanwhile, he was petens Sicilium, he was seeking Cilicia, with all his copia, with all his forces. It was a region which is called the camp of Cyrus, and he pervenerated there. Usually takes an ad or an in, but not here. Stativa illic habuit Cyrus. So Cyrus, illic there, had a stativa. It's a stationary camp, so they don't move it about, it's permanent. When against Croesum, he had ducerated, he led his men or something into Lydia. Away from this region, by 50 stadia, from the approach to which we enter Intramus Cilicia. Pylas, the inhabitants call it, Dicunt. Very narrow jaws or entranceway. Its monumentum, its fortresses, which we make by hand, it imitates in this site naturally. Igitor Amases. Therefore Amases, who was in charge of Cilia, the dative, present participle, he was thinking about what Memnon had persuaded Initio Bello at the beginning of the war, which had quondam once upon a time. It had been a salubre neuter, it had been a healthy plan, but Ciro, the adverb, late, he had decided to follow it up, or carry it out. Ignean Ferro. With fire and iron, he devastated Cilicia, so that he made it a solitudinem, a wasteland for the enemy, whatever was able to be useful, he corrupted it. Sterile and bare was the soil, which would not be able, what he was not able to look over or use. When he was relictus, when he was leaving, anything that he couldn't use, he burnt and devastated. Said longe utilius foot, but by far it would have been useful, takes the infinitive, at the narrow approachway, Angustius Narrows, which opens up the land of Cilia, to occupy. There's the infinitive. It would have been more useful to hold this with a valid presidio, with a very strong guard or something, or bunch of men, and to obtain or keep control of this imminence, meaning it's overhanging jugum, so it's overhanging ridges, would have been the best opportune sort of on this pathway, on the itinerary, from where in Ultus, where unavenged, he would have been able to prohibe or opprime. He would have been able to prohibit or crush any hostem enemy who was subiunting, who was travelling along it. Nunc porcus, now with just a few who presided or in charge of these pathways, the calabosses, left behind. He himself, ipsi, he conceded, and he went away, retro, he went off. As a populator, as the devastator of a land, than which he ought to have been the vindicare, the protector or the defender from devastations and population. Depopulating is when you ravage, and changed over time in late Latin, but generally means to devastate it. Ergo, therefore then, those who were relicti left behind, they ratied themselves. They thought themselves as betrayed. It's the passive version of it. This is like ne quidem, but it's net quidem. Not even were they strong enough or able to sustain the conspectum, the sight of the hostis of the enemy. When even, I'd say that's the adverb vel, so even with a fewer amount, they would have been able to obtain the place or hold the place down. And we've got a long one today. Namqui. 4. The perpetual Yugo, ridges or mountain ranges, ridges of the mountains, were harsh, asperi and proropti, jagged and cliff-like, which included or shut in Cilicia. Quad which or that rose up. It's like these yugums with the neuter. It raises up from the sea as if a certain type of sinew, which is a curve. You see things like bays, etc., and that sinuous curving sort of thing. And flexu means it bends. It's curvatum, so it's curvature. And again, with its other horn, it's like the moon, if you see how it bends like that. It runs up into a different shore. So it comes up from the sea in this big curvy sinuous thing, and it goes backwards again to a different shore. Per hoc dorsum. Dolphins have got dorsal fins. It means on the back. So this is on the back on the mountains, where maxime are especially introrsus, means inward inland ways away from the ocean. It seeds away from the sea. There are 3 asperus adytuses, 3 very harsh approaches, and thoroughly all very, very narrow they are, of which one, and we have a gerundive of must obligation here, and from which must be entered Cilicia. So if you're going to go there, you have to go through this very per angusti entranceway. Campestris edem, these same campestruses, these flatlands or fields or whatever they are, which verge it off to the sea, which verge or turn off to the sea, is a planatem. And this is the flatland. It's very distinguished a bit with Crebris riverus. It's distinguished by frequent rivers. The Pyrus and the Cydnus, these are the Enclitus rivers, the famous rivers which flow. Here's your daily dictionary. Campestre, flat level ground, plural plains. You've got a female version, that one up there's neuter. Female ones are the deity, goddess of the fields. There's another one down here which is male, deities who preside over contest games. Okay, so we're talking about the neuter one there. The Cydnus River, not because of its space of its waters, because of how capacious or big it is, but it's memorable by its liquor, how it's clear liquid. Since, with a Lenai tractu, very soft course, from springs, fontibuses, it labens, present participle, it flows out, and it's received ex cipitur in pure soil. Neither the torrents run into it, so it's not flowing fast, mudding it up. The alveum's the riverbed, so it's placidly at Menantis, it like dribbles in or flows in or whatever on this river bends, and so it doesn't turbentum, it doesn't disturb it. Itaque incorruptus, and so for then, and so accordingly it's incorrupt, and the same is frigidissimus, superlatively cold. Since with the pleasantness, it's shadowed very much of it by its riverbanks, or on its riverbanks it's very inumbrad, very shadowy, and from everywhere, from its springs, similarly it invades the sea, you might want to say, it flows into the sea. Malta in this region, Malta monuments, many monuments in this region, which are vulgata, commonly known in songs. Vetustus, old age, has eaten them away, these old monuments. Here is monstrated or pointed out the seat of a bunch of cities, including Larsine, Thebes, also the Specus, the cave of Typhon, and the grove, the Nemus Coricum, where Saffron, Crocrum is gignatored or born, and other ones in which nothing besides its fame has endured. The end.